Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to episode 44 of the Cloudcast. Aaron and I are coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Aaron, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. How is everyone today?
We're good. So today, we're going to kind of extend one of our discussions that we've been having about the next generation of cloud computing and the evolution of applications. And today our guest is Michael Surkan, Director of Product Marketing for Uhuru Software. Michael, welcome aboard.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so
it's a lot of fun.
Very good. Michael was kind enough to have me on a guest of the Uhuru podcast a few weeks ago. We decided to return the favor, and I think timing-wise, Michael, when you and I were talking the last time, Uhuru was in the middle or very, very close to announcing some new things or moving forward. Give us an update on who you guys are, what's new with your product space slash service space, and kind of give everybody an introduction to you and the company.
Sure. So first off, it's Uhuru.
Okay.
So it's Uhuru, and Uhuru Software, and we have, which is a Tanzanian word. One of our founders is from Tanzania, and it means freedom. And so we're all about bringing freedom to developers who want to host their apps and not have to worry about IT or servers and so on. So that's the mission of our company, and this is an excellent time to talk because we're right now in the process of releasing our second major beta. When we first launched in December, we came out with a beta of our platform as a service, which is it's a hosting environment that allows people to push and deploy apps, or developers primarily. So it's all about developers being able to host their apps without having to worry about servers. As you would with traditional infrastructure as a service where you get virtual machines. So this is more along the lines of a Heroku or App Harbor or an Azure, although Azure now is doing virtual machines, where you just push your application, specify the services you want. We have a lot of great things that I think are going to appeal to a lot of developers. We're already seeing in our first beta. We're multi-platform, so we support not just Ruby and PHP and Node.js and Java, but the open source platforms everybody knows and loves. But we also support .NET. And one thing that's totally blown me away, when we first launched, I was expecting, when we came out with our beta in December, I had thought that we would see the users be kind of on a single stack, that we'd see the Microsoft users, they want to use Microsoft SQL Server, and they want to use their .NET, and that's what the apps they're going to push. And you'd see the Ruby users who'd say, hey, I'm all Linux and open source, I'm going to use MongoDB and Ruby, and these are all services we offer, right? MongoDB and Java and Microsoft SQL Server, amongst others. And I thought these people would be, single stack. But what it turns out is that a lot of the people who really are interested in our PaaS, in our platform as a service, like it because they can mix and match things. So there's been a whole lot of .NET developers who sign up because they say, oh, I'm really interested in using MongoDB or RabbitMQ, message queuing service, which are open source Linux apps, and I want to use them with my .NET app because I love .NET, but I want to use these open source services, but I don't want to have to set up my own Linux boxes or manage MongoDB myself. So anyway, I'm just saying that it actually was a shock to me that one of the biggest applications or interests in using this would be people who wanted to merge these two worlds of open source and .NET.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because when you read about things like this and you start hearing about things, it's typically, I'm this kind of developer or I'm that kind of developer, and it almost is a religion at times, right? And it's like, oh, don't cross the paths, right? But it sounds like actually there is an interest in that in the market.
Yeah, and the other thing I would guess, and Michael, give us some insight on this, because you kind of curate, if you will, a really large community. I've been interested in how big the community around what you guys do is. But I'm seeing more and more where you've got developers that maybe have a core competency in one language, so it's Ruby or it's Java or it's .NET. But part of most developers' sort of psyche is they're curious by nature. They're always looking for sort of quicker ways to get some things done. And so you're hearing about people who will say, "Well, I built this application, and yeah, the core of it is in .NET, it's in Java, it's in Ruby. But I wrote this little thing over here, it's in Node.js, and I have this other thing over here where, like you said, I needed a really fast message bus, and so I'm using RabbitMQ, and because things like some of these PaaS platforms, and I believe you guys leverage the Cloud Foundry PaaS platform, it gives you those options, whereas maybe in the past, a straight .NET stack didn't really give you easy ways to have those options. Are you seeing sort of that type of mix and match happening? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't make sense to use one tool for everything anymore, right? The world is diverse enough with development platforms and so on that you're limiting yourself to use the same hammer for everything, right?
Everything's a nail.
If all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so, I mean, some platforms and systems are better suited to certain things, and so why not use that? And in the case of these languages, right? Like if you're really familiar with .NET and you're really productive with it, why should you have to use Ruby or Java just because you now want to use a NoSQL database, right? And you'd like to use MongoDB, so take advantage of that. And so I'm really seeing that being, not only does it make sense, but we're really seeing it happen. And it's certainly the beta testers we've been getting so far, people signing up to our PaaS. That's a very popular scenario that those people are interested in. And you're right. We are using Uhuru has taken the open source Cloud Foundry technology, and we've used that as a base to build a lot of enhancements on. Mm-hmm. So we added .NET. They don't have any Windows Server or .NET support or Microsoft SQL Server support in Cloud Foundry that VMware came out with, and we've made our .NET extensions available on open source as well. And our new beta now has a lot more extensions. We have a complete web UI now that you can manage your apps, deploy apps from a web console that's really slick. You just got to see it. And we also have a team collaboration. So you can have more than one person. You can have as many people as you like participating, managing and deploying the same apps. Which is a very unique feature that's not very prominent out there. It's very. I think a lot of developers will really love that because not everybody's working all by themselves, right? A lot of this you're working on teams with other people, and so this works really well. And so there's a bunch of other. Of course, our first beta was actually being hosted on one of our engineers' desks in Romania, just a box sitting on his desk. Our new beta is running on an honest to goodness production level data center in the U.S. And it's been a private beta so far. Just 2 weeks ago, we started telling some of our existing beta users they could try out our new beta. And we were getting feedback to make sure it was solid before we went announce. But hey, you're the first. I'll make a public announcement. We have a really enhanced beta for Uhuru now, and anybody can. All the listeners are welcome to go sign up. And the website, we have not put the link to the new beta on our main website yet. The URL for our new beta is uhurucloud.com, UHURU cloud.com.
Okay,
Very
get that.
cool.
We'll get that in the show notes. You talked about the new sort of web interface, and you have a very slick demo on your homepage that sort of shows how to get an app deployed in just under 5 minutes, which was very, very cool. You talked a little bit about the collaboration framework, which I think is neat, and I think it's kind of an evolving paradigm. I know in my regular life, in some of the big data things that are going on, people that are doing analytics. One of the companies that I work with, Greenplum, has added something that is basically social communication, social collaboration around data analytics. You're doing it around application development, which is very, very cool. You talked about kind of not being completely focused on say Microsoft developers, but you highlighted some of the things you're doing around .NET. What's on the mind of Microsoft app developers these days, and why why does something like PaaS and to a certain extent some of these non-Azure PaaS platforms, why are they what's on their mind? What's interesting to them? What's critical in their sort of path for next development these days?
To a great extent, I don't think that .NET developers are any different than other developers in the broader community. I think the biggest difference is that many .NET developers, at least from what I'm hearing of people in our community, and we have right now over 6,600 people in our LinkedIn group on Uhuru. And so from what I'm hearing from the .NET developers we've been engaged with is that they feel left out. They want to be able to participate in a lot of the neat new technologies that have really been emerging in the open source and Linux world, such as the NoSQL databases, although there are some coming out on Windows now, like RavenDB, who I interviewed on our podcast show. I interviewed one of the key developers of RavenDB recently. But there's a lot of new technologies coming out in the open source world that these Microsoft developers haven't been able to take advantage of, and so they feel like they're left out. So I don't think it's so much that they're different than other developers, but they feel somewhat neglected. And even when Microsoft does things with Azure, like when Microsoft first came out with Azure, it required changes to your code. So then they felt like, gosh, you're supposed to be helping me, Microsoft, but this is a little bit difficult. Now, Azure's made a lot of improvements since, but there's still a lot of you have to recompile and you have to do a bunch of things. So, I think I think that the .NET developers have often felt that they've been on the outside looking in at a lot of the neat cloud stuff going on and new developments and technologies, and I think that's the biggest difference I can think of.
And Michael, you just actually mentioned something that I was getting ready to ask you about is how compatible is both your platform versus Azure versus other things that are out there? Like how easy is it for your beta testers that are out there today to actually take existing projects and migrate them into your environment?
Okay, well, I'll give you the marketing answer, and then I'll tell you the truth. So the marketing answer is that, hey, we were 100% compatible with existing .NET apps and on the Uhuru PaaS, and that you can run anything unmodified. We'll run your apps unmodified. But that's only part of the story. The reality is that you cannot really have a successful app on any cloud unless you have, shall we say, a cloud compatible app that is mainly the big thing is it has to be stateless. So if you have an application that requires it's looking for states, makes a lot of state settings on the OS itself. So in the Windows case, you're doing things in the registry or a variety of other state things, and you're storing it in the OS. It's going to be very difficult to take your app to the cloud. And I don't care whose PaaS or even IIS or virtualization platform you want to go to. It's going to be difficult.
Sure. So it's not so much an Uhuru thing as much as it is just taking a .NET app and making it cloud ready for anybody's platform, correct?
Yeah, and that's not even a .NET thing. I mean, there's lots of people with Java apps who've made big dependencies on the OS and on Linux. So I think this applies across the board, and I think a lot of developers are just now really wrapping their heads around what it means to have a cloud-compatible app and not keep your state in the app. I mean, it just makes your app so much more difficult to scale. You can't just – if you're relying hugely on dependencies in the OS, and you can't just spin off new instances of your application, right, to have multiple copies of it running to handle more load, it isn't going to work. So I think that's the biggest issue. Now, that aside, the Uhuru Cloud is very compatible with .NET. In fact, all we've done is taken standard Windows 2008 servers and soon to be 2012 servers, and we put them on in our server farm. So it'll run anything that if you can run your app on a Windows server on Windows Server, it's going to run on our PaaS. By contrast, Azure actually has made changes to the OS, and so they've actually changed some of the stuff that there are. Now, there are some advantages to some of the things they've done. You can get into the pros and cons, but I would actually, I think it's fair to say that we're more compatible with existing .NET apps than Azure is.
So I can't blame it on Microsoft, the registry, and
No.
This is actually, a bigger problem than that. See, that's no fun. I wanted to blame the registry again.
Well, I worked at Microsoft for 9 years, and I can I can be their biggest critic, but I'll also say that a lot of things they get blamed for, other people have similar problems, right? So this is what we were talking about, issues of converting apps to the cloud and to run on the Uhuru PaaS, is the main issues, the things you got to worry about are not unique to .NET at all, right? You're going to face that no matter what development, whether you're using Java, Ruby, or whatever.
So let's talk for a second about your customers or your developers and so forth. One of the things that we've heard from different people as we talk about PaaS is the developers, at least in theory, love the concept. I can quickly deploy things. I don't have to buy resources like I used to. I don't have to go fight IT. But the flip side of that is there's a certain amount of security and comfort, and that's my box. I can go touch it. I can go tweak it. What are you guys seeing? I'll sort of ask this in two parts. What are you seeing as you talk to developers about sort of getting over that fear of the what's in the black box? And then sort of the second part of it is, being open source, like you said, curating this huge community. How much does the community help developers kind of get over that fear or that concern that maybe they didn't have the same visibility as they did in the past when it was their own boxes and OS and patches and stuff?
Yeah, I don't know how much I don't know how much it is that people are afraid of losing control over boxes, and from the perspective of software engineers, they often don't have a lot of control over the boxes hosting their stuff anyway, even in a traditional environment, right? They hand it over to some IT person, and that person is now controls everything. So, in many senses, this empowers them. A PaaS like ours, a platform as a service, it empowers the developer, because the developer they're the ones pushing their app directly to the cloud when they want it, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're relying on your IT staff to do stuff, then it's a lot more delay, and you have much less control over what's going on. Now, that said, I mean, there definitely are cases where developers require a lot of fine-tuning of the OS, and they've done – I mean, we're going through the phase now, as we were just discussing, of people realizing what they have to do to build cloud-compatible stateless apps. And so there's a lot of developers who have traditionally relied on deep changes and configuration stuff in an OS, and they're having to learn that. And I think that is really the biggest thing, that the biggest issue out there. You also get into some concerns about ownership of data, right? Like, this data isn't sitting on in our environment anymore. What guarantees do we have that our data will be secure? And then, depending on the industry, right, you can have people in financial or healthcare industry that have a lot of regulations, and they're very concerned about whether their data is going to be managed in a really secure way. And those are valid concerns, and it's up to the hosting world, companies like Uhuru and elsewhere, to meet the SLA requirements that they have and get HIPAA certified or whatever. And in the case of Uhuru, our strategy is that we provide our software, our PaaS software, available for licensing to any other service providers who want it. So we have one public partner right now, Logicalis, who's a hoster, and they're offering HIPAA compliant hosting, and they even on an Uhuru, using our Uhuru PaaS software. So they can offer a company that needs HIPAA compliance for healthcare an Uhuru PaaS. And so, of course, you pay for these additional types of levels of security and data management, but that's a way then that that service providers can differentiate, right? Logicalis is able to differentiate themselves by having these high levels of security and so on. And it allows us as Uhuru to be able to address a broader set of users that we can't ourselves address in hosting.
Okay. And so do you see that, so specifically that kind of HIPAA compliant cloud, as a potentially emerging trend of, instead of these, big PaaS platforms that support everything and anything, almost a bunch more of specialized, micro PaaSes, if I use that term, specialized or customized, more around a functional area or a certain aspect of compliance, or, it's almost like, boutique PaaSes or something like that, specialized to a certain aspect.
I think we're going to see the hosting industry evolve to have some big players who kind of offer the generic service that is kind of cut rate generic that everybody can go to, and then you'll have a bunch of people who differentiate by offering unique types of things, as we were just saying, extra security or something, HIPAA compliance. But also national issues, right? Because this is not just a United States thing, and we've run into this a lot. A lot of the interest in our PaaS is coming from people outside of the U.S. In fact, I'm just stunned at how many of our beta testers are from India and Eastern Europe and stuff. And I think these PaaSes and cloud platforms appeal to these countries a lot, because they might not have the same degree of IT expertise or otherwise, and so this really appeals to them, and then many times they want local hosting. They don't want to. There can even be legal reasons in some of these other countries where it's illegal to have data of your nationals stored on foreign soil. And so I know Canada, where I'm from Canada originally, they have laws there that insist that data and privacy concerns, that data for Canadian customers onto your website be stored in Canada.
Yeah, we've sort of explored that we've had some lawyers and all on the show. We've talked about the U.S. Freedom of Information Act and how companies that are international or companies that are multinational are having to deal with those issues of what physical country does my data actually reside in? What's the guidance? What's the rules that the governing body of that country, can they come and take my data? How do they get search and seizure? And so it'll be a big deal, and it kind of leads me into what I'll make sort of the last question, so we don't run too long here. PaaS is still in a really, really early days. I mean, yes, there's a couple of different vendors that are out there, or companies that are starting to make announcements. Like you said, you guys are obviously in beta. I would assume, right now everybody's kind of running. You can come to, uhurusoftware.com or, like you said, Uhuru Cloud, and run it, an early beta version. But I would guess, and correct me if I'm wrong here, with all those issues, which country things run in, how people want to run them, I would guess the market is probably eventually going to get to, you guys don't play the role of both service provider and software provider. It'll probably evolve back into more of a natural state of where you're really community advocate, software provider, and then you'll sell to somebody in India, different from Romania, different from Canada, from the U.S. Is that kind of where you see things going, or do you think we'll see a lot of these dual role, somebody acting as a service provider and also as a software provider?
Unfortunately, my crystal ball is
predict the future. Yeah,
my crystal ball is broken today, so we're going to go where the market wants us to go, right? If there's lots of service providers who want to be hosting Uhuru-powered clouds, we're more than delighted to help them do that. We know that we cannot possibly meet all the needs there are for PaaSes, right? We were just saying that we're not in a position to we're gearing up to offer a commercial PaaS ourselves for small businesses, small and mid-sized businesses towards the end of this year. But it's going to be quite a while before we're in a position to offer a HIPAA compliant PaaS, and then it's going to be longer than that for us to offer PaaSes in Australia and Africa or wherever other national things that people want. So it's just not possible for us to be offering our own Uhuru hosted services everywhere and with all the different needs that people will have. And so, in fact, I just can't imagine that we'll ever be able to do that, really. So, I don't know. We'll see how the industry grows and shakes out, and we're just going to follow where our customers and where the demand really is. And right now, we see that there is demand for some hosted service, and having a hosted service ourselves helps us really harden our software. And it even believe it or not, we've been getting more interest from ISPs because we've been doing hosting, and it kind of shows them, oh, this is how you do it. We can demonstrate it to them.
Interesting learnings. Well, Aaron, I think we're kind of getting towards the end of the week, and we're getting towards the end of the show. You want to take us home, or any last thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michael, where can everyone go to find out more about the cloud beta? And I think you mentioned the LinkedIn group. So tell us a little bit about where everyone can go.
Well, just go to our Uhuru website, uhurusoftware.com. That's UHURU software.com. From there, we have our link to we have links to our LinkedIn group. We have a podcast show. We have a lot of stuff, and even links to our beta. Although our new beta, which is, we have not publicly announced that on our main website yet. And if you want to go to that, that's uhurucloud.com, UHURU cloud.com.
Okay, very cool. All right. So you can follow us on Twitter at thecloudcastnet, or you can reach us on the web at thecloudcast.net, where you'll find links to the show and show notes. You can follow our YouTube channel. You can find links to the show for iTunes or Stitcher. And I think that's about it for this week, guys. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening.